So we're going to continue our climate change resilience theme, and the next panel is entitled Planning for Uncertainty, Lessons from Flood Events, COVID and Christchurch Earthquakes for the Future. Please join me in welcoming Craig Dixon, Lan Pham and Hope Simonson to the stage.
Kia ora tātou aho, Craig Dixon, here from Otatahi and reside in my tūranga waiwai really is Brindwa, the land of John Key, where extant is one of the largest social housing kind of groups in the country, so I'm told. I want to talk to you, or tell you a story actually. Once upon a time, many years ago, there was a cathedral in the square. I happen to be on the staff of the cathedral. I know Chris Chamberlain started going to preaching mode a couple of days ago and excite everybody. I'm also a minister in the Anglican Church. Spent most of my time as a parish vicar. But when the earthquakes occurred, I was in the cathedral and by the grace of one of the volunteers who was having his lunch and therefore couldn't hold the ladder for me while I was taking down the banner on that tower, 10 minutes after that, he sent me away for 10 minutes. 10 minutes after that, the earthquake hit. So if he hadn't been eating his lunch, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I want to tell you the story about the building which became the first public structure to be rebuilt after the earthquakes, the cardboard cathedral. And some of the learnings for me about that journey that we went on to create something which is known around the world. It belongs to the diocese, the Anglican diocese. I wished it belonged to the city. I don't think the diocese quite know what they've got. This is the first and probably the only ever Pritzker Prize-winning architectural design in New Zealand. I'll tell you a little bit more in a minute about that. Hopefully those who are visiting had a chance to go and have a look. It's one of the safest, probably the safest structures in the city. And I want to tell you how the story of the build of that structure morphed into my experience with housing. So I'm also here as one of the folk employed by Naylor Love to be working principally in the area of community housing. Here's a wonderful little piece. Lunik, I like Michael Lunik, he's an Australian, comes up with some wonderful cartoons. How wonderful, he's moving with the times. He just took his first step backwards. It annoys the hell out of me that I have had to live in, and many, many people live in houses here in New Zealand that are absolutely not fit for purpose. We have not been building houses well for a long, long time, and we are still not doing it. And one of the messages I want to bring to you today is we need to think very carefully about what structures we are putting up for people. Some of the learnings from the building of the cardboard cathedral, one was think outside the square. So my birthday was May the 4th, and my wife gave me a magazine, and in that magazine was an article about this Shigeru Ban, this architect. He built a cardboard church in Kobe, and I thought, hey, that's amazing. So I went back to Peter Beck, the dean at the time, and said, we should build a cardboard cathedral. Can I get in touch with this guy, Shigeru Ban? And they kind of smiled and laughed and, smirked. Well, what the hell? I mean, anything was up in those days after the earthquake. So 6 weeks later, Shigeru Ban was in New Zealand. Get a great architect is one of the learnings that I discovered. Someone who was passionate about structures for people. Shigeru is one of the world's most celebrated architects. He received the Pritzker Prize partly because of the construction of the cardboard cathedral. Now, I was in a book shop just the other day, and I saw that his latest book, his structures from 2015, from 1985 to 2015, and on the front cover was the cardboard cathedral. So I got in touch with him, said, Shigeru, was that just the New Zealand publication? He said, no, that was everywhere. He was amazed at what happened when he came to New Zealand, amazed at the way, there he goes, Shigeru Ban, look him up, incredible stuff. For every commercial job design he puts together, that helps him with 4 to 5 humanitarian projects. He's doing it all around the world constantly. What happened was this amazing team came together. It was another learning in disaster. Suddenly, people started to take note of who their neighbours were. Now, we live in a life where you can order your food in by Uber, where you can live in an isolated location, everything will come to you. We are doing that more and more and more. But when you hit an emergency, and whether it be COVID or whether it be what we experienced here in Christchurch, suddenly community takes place. But one of the things that we need to be focusing on, I think, is how can we create community? And when I was vicar of Brynda a number of years ago, we started up a food co-op. Not giving food to people, but discounting fruit and vegetables, better food, 50%. We had 180 families coming along every week. After the earthquakes, we extended that out. Within a very short time, we were providing 5,000 packs here in Christchurch. I would spend $50,000 a week at the market, and we had to, in the end, hide the produce because the supermarkets were getting very, very jumpy. But what happened was the church, the community, everyone came together, the team came together, and amazing things happened. That's what happened with the Cardboard Cathedral. Warren and Marnie, Holmes Consulting, Becca, many people had nothing to do with the church necessarily, didn't love the church necessarily. That's a wise thing, actually, you've got to watch them. They came together and amazing things happened. Here we go, the Shigeru, Yoshia, his associate architect, and some of the team. We worked away, we pushed through the negative, we created something that was kind of amazing and weird. The negative came principally from the church. I had to battle with the bishop and the diocese to get this baby built. It wasn't anyone else, it was the church. And partly they are very risk averse, partly they want to kind of look backwards, not forwards, partly when they should be prophetic. So when these disasters happen, push through that negative stuff and be prophetic and go where people have not gone before and watch people and help people to follow along. The other thing I learned was build permanent. Now, Shigeru Ban said a permanent structure is a structure that people love. It can be a tent in Cathedral Square. If they love it, they will keep kind of rebuilding it. A temporary structure is a big, solid concrete building. An earthquake comes along and you pull it down. So the thing that I want to say to you about houses is build something that works for people, build something that people will love, and it will be a permanent structure. People laugh at the Cardboard Cathedral. What they don't know, they say, oh no, it's going to fall down. Actually, it will be there for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's a symbol of the earthquakes. It is a solid baby. With all of those tubes, there are LVL beams, 600 by 900, 27 metres tall. There's 97 of them. That baby is not going anywhere. The way that we build is really important. Now let me get on to the morphing. So the Mahana House, Naylor Love, I went along to them about 4.5 years ago and said, we've got problems with building. They built the Cardboard Cathedral at cost and they put cash in. We've got a problem. Why don't we have a go at building a great house for a great price? It's going to last for a long time, be wonderful to live in. Do you want to have a shot? And they said, absolutely yes. And away it went. There's those little wee, triangular things that we've been giving away from Naylor Love. That's all about the Mahana House. We have problems with our homes in New Zealand. We had the leaky home problem, the water coming in from outside in. Now we're going to have a problem in reverse. The moisture inside cannot get out. We're building our houses so well sealed up, even just a standard house, so well sealed up, unless you ventilate that house with mechanical ventilation, you're going to have a problem. You're going to drown it from the inside out. 40,000 children are hospitalised in New Zealand every year because of the house that they live in. 40,000 people. We've got a massive problem. So we've come up with this house, and the reason that I kind of push it is Naylor Love have decided that this is their corporate responsibility project. They are there saying, we're a big company, they employ just under 1,000 people, it's privately owned. Turnover this year will be $1 billion, and they are saying, here you go, we are here, let us help, give you some advice, or if you're interested in the Mahana House, we think this house, which Shigeru Ban helped design, brings the principles that we need to incorporate in our houses. One of the big issues we've got is CO2. Talked to someone who did a study on the carbon dioxide in homes. recently. He looked at 20 passive houses with mechanical ventilation. All but one failed. So you can imagine what houses without ventilation are doing, unless, of course, they were built in the 30s or 40s or 50s, where they leaked and you get that air exchange, not an issue. But most of us go to bed at night and we are breathing air that is 3 times what the World Health Organization say is the recommended maximum. That's 1,000 parts per million. Once you get over that, we'll be 2.5 to 3. Once you get over that, you've got cognitive issues, learning issues with children, sleep problems. It's a massive problem, and no one says anything about it. Mechanical ventilation, Kāinga Ora strictly forbade it until recently, and now they've changed their tune. So how we build is really, really important. So the Mahana house, solid floors. You don't want to put carpet in a house. It has a high carbon value, carbon footprint. It's up there with glass, steel, concrete, and aluminium. If you've got a warm house, you put solid floors in. There's no jib in this house. There's mechanical ventilation in this house. We recess the windows. No one overseas in Europe sticks a window on the outside of a house. You recess the window into the insulation line of the house. You improve its performance by about 14%. We really need to change what we're doing. We're setting ourselves up for big problems. There's a house that we recently built for Habitat. We put in a hot water heat pump, which reduces those who live in the house the cost of heating their water by 2/3. And we give a warm heat that's not blowing the dust around or spot heating. There you go. There are 2 houses here in Christchurch, and they have hot water heat pumps and radiators, hot water radiators. It's not that expensive, and it's a fantastic way to live. Just built these for Otatahi, and they won last week the National Registered Masters Builders Award for innovation. These houses have cross-laminated timber in them, balanced sea ventilation that the residents cannot turn off. It's cheap to run, about 60 to 80 cents a day, keeps them healthy. Sequester carbon in your building. Build to last. We build for 50 years. That's rubbish. And most of the product has a warranty of 15 years. And then if your roof fails after that, it's your problem. That is disgusting. We should be building structures that are going to last 100, 150, 200 years. So you are out there building these houses. You need to be very careful about what you're building. Sequester carbon, low carbon footprint. Most homes in New Zealand are 8 times the carbon footprint they need to be for us to meet our 2050 climate accord. 8 times. Anyway, I want to give the other folk a chance to have a wee chat. I don't want to go on forever. So, look, we would love to help. Honestly, when I talk to my boss, Scott Watson, not the Scott Watson, when he talks to folk about this project, they ask him why Nala Love are doing it, and he says because it's the right thing to do. So please use us. We're here. We'd love to help. Kia ora.
Are we on? Yes, we are. So I thought that perhaps Craig was going to ask you both some questions, but perhaps I've been briefed incorrectly. So maybe it ought to be me. Maybe I'll hand over to both of you first, and so you can describe a bit about your work, and then we'll see if we've got time to have a bit of a facilitated discussion. Do you have a mic next to you? Or has that been pinched for questions? Yes, it has.
Thank you. Well, he mihi mahana kia koutou kua tai mai nei, me mana whenua. A really big greeting to all of you. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, just mihi to tēnai tuahuriri runanga as mana whenua here. Gosh, who am I? I am Lan Farm, and my background is actually in freshwater and also local government. So you might be wondering why I'm here, but I was asked to be here today to basically speak as a human being and a human being in this world, because my background is in ecology, and I know you've been thrashing out on the walls around us and in your conversations and with the presentations about housing. But I guess for today, in ending, I just wanted to thanks Tech Crew. I just wanted to start by reflecting on this image, which will hopefully, maybe I need to do like the magic trick. Yeah, okay, awesome. Our first and our only home, and that is obviously Earth. And here we have, in the very corner there, Aotearoa, and I wanted to just reflect on this image because to me it sort of reminds us of the vastness of not only our world, but how vulnerable and special it is that we actually are firstly alive. And that we really, right now, hearing from Rod, that we actually need to fight for that we need to decide that we want to be here, that we want our kids and our grandkids to have a, ideally a relatively stable future on this planet. And that we're currently facing a lot of problems. So the problems ultimately, stem from disconnection from the idea and the fact that we live in a finite planet and a very precious planet, and that we've been exploiting it for too long, and so that needs to change. And it also comes from disconnection to us in our communities from each other. And so we've got increasing polarisation. We don't have intergenerational connection with each other. And that's leading to a whole bunch of things that are threatening, the very foundations of for example, our democratic structures and our government systems. So these are huge issues. But I think the thing that has been really clear even today in the presentations, that there is a way to combat this, that there is an antidote, and that is connection. So it's connection to nature and our environment, and actually recognising how precious and vulnerable we are on this planet. But the way that we connect in terms of where our housing is, and Pānapa obviously did an amazing presentation of that, where the whare ora was in connection to food, to education, to employment, to transport networks. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we need to do if we're really going to resolve these big global challenges. And I was really excited to see that. But then lastly, I want this image to kind of remind us that we have this incredible opportunity here in Aotearoa, where Te Tiriti invites us to actually be here in this special place of the world, and actually create a just and fair and equitable society. And that's what we can create, and it's just at our fingertips. And I just want to, I'm so glad to be here to be able to reflect on that. And that's some intro comments from me. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, ko Hope Simonson ahau, e mahi ana ahau Emerge Aotearoa. I think I might have got the brief wrong there, Jade. Did a presentation. Hey, look, it's absolutely wonderful to be here with you. It's felt like a big, really overdue family reunion. So really pleased to be here. I just wanted to pay special tribute to the CHAR team. This has been an incredible 3 days, and we know how much effort goes into this kind of thing. You guys have done fantastically. The presenters have been amazing. We've had jam-packed days full of really thought-provoking content. Almost every stream we could take and create a whole new conference around it. Jade, look, there's no easy job wrangling us. You've achieved it with really good grace, with good humour, and your added insights are always just so spot on. You're amazing. So a little bit about Emerge Aotearoa. Is it going to work? We're a community housing provider, we're a transitional housing provider, and we're a national provider of health and disability services. We have over 400 social housing properties and 1,000 transitional housing places from Whangarei to Invercargill, so we're a national provider. We are a provider of housing first in Wellington and Christchurch. We're a values-driven organisation, and we have a very strong commitment to 3 strategic pou, which are Māori succeeding as Māori, thriving Pacific communities, and privileging lived experience and diversity. So the theme for this presentation is planning for uncertainty, and I'm taking the view of a provider who's been through, as a national provider, who has been through 3 kind of main big events. Firstly, the Christchurch earthquakes, and then obviously COVID, and more recently flooding in Auckland, Hawke's Bay and Gisborne, and just acknowledging that there are many people in the room here today who've also experienced some, if not all, of these events. So for Christchurch, we didn't have any housing in Christchurch at the time. The challenges were really for the team in the health and disability services. Almost everyone was affected and traumatised. No water, power, sewage, no communication. Transport was really challenging. And then for our tangata whai ora, medication management, getting prescriptions from GPs and pharmacies. Staff who weren't affected had to work 24/7. There was no pre-planning. We had no business continuity plan. We had no disaster management plan. And the ongoing aftershocks were really traumatising for people. And just knowing that this wasn't going to be a quick fix. So the community response from Emerge at the time was moving people to stay with family and friends out of town where possible. And those that could move about the city were doing the deliveries of medication and food. The response from the rest of Aotearoa was phenomenal, and that really did come to the fore with regard to how people felt in Christchurch. So lessons from this influenced the way that we dealt with other disasters, and certainly COVID, and we heard Jill, Kate, Nathan and Chris talk about how they found community solutions in disasters yesterday, and we also had Rachel's really useful and insightful research on the impact of COVID for public housing tenants. And then again, lessons learned through Cyclone Gabrielle in February 2023, Auckland, Hawke's Bay, Tairāwhiti, widespread flooding, power and communication outages. That was the most challenging thing as far as we were concerned in a national sense, was not being able to communicate with the people on the ground. Those people on the ground, however, welfare checks, went out and talked with all of the Emerge whānau, and they contacted them, and they were all accounted for within that 3-day time period. Civil Defence came to the fore, providing short-term accommodation for people. So the community response was also, again, phenomenal, making sure that everyone had food. And I guess this just goes to who we are as community housing providers. We are the first port call for a lot of people in terms of their connection. So making sure everyone had food, a way to cook, and medications that they needed. Food parcels and supplies, this was a real community effort, particularly in the Hawke's Bay. Nourish for Nil had 200 food parcels packed and distributed by Emerge staff. WIT, 150 food parcels, and Emerge did around 120 meat packs over that first few weeks. The Generator, who's a small social enterprise within the Emerge group, provided Starlink portable satellite internet access for 3 communities and donated truckloads full of bedding, clothing, toys, personal items and food to whānau in Wairoa. It was actually one of the interesting things that came out of it was trying to find ways to access power for those that really needed it, in particular those with electric wheelchairs. So what can we do to plan for the unplanned? We've heard today about weather events, earthquakes, pandemics, and planning for these events is crucial to ensuring the safety and wellbeing for communities. What we know when we listen to Dr. Carr is that we can expect these events to happen. There's no two ways about that, but it's important to really consider what we can do as community housing providers. So talk a little bit about design to help prevent and mitigate any future damage and being prepared. And in a way, some of this feels quite sort of trivial and small in relation to what we're dealing with, but I think it still doesn't hurt for us to be focused on something. So if we're thinking about design to minimise damage, location selection, I think we've heard that as well, that's going to be really important in terms of where we grow as community housing providers. Making sure that we've done those site assessments based on the history of flooding, even though we might not know what's coming in front of us. Structural design, earthquake-resistant structures and elevated sites with permeable areas and really good drainage, including reinforced foundations, flexible building materials and appropriate structural bracing. Other aspects to design, elevation and drainage, making sure if the area is prone to flooding that we're building homes on elevated platforms or piles to minimise flooding, and that we're ensuring drainage systems are in place. Material selection, we've heard a little bit about that today as well, building materials that are resistant to fire, wind and water damage, and actually retrofitting those into existing structures where we can as well. Being prepared in terms of the support we need to provide to people. And just a note, the photo there is the youngest whānau member of one of our amazing leaders at Emerge Aotearoa, and that was her wee bed while her mama was working on providing food packs to people in Cyclone Gabrielle. And this is where, again, I think the community housing sector comes to the fore, making sure that they're having input into their communities about where those emergency shelters are going to be, making sure that people are accessing them and have access to food, water and first aid. I think we need to be part of community planning. We're an integral part of communities and making sure that we're involved in evacuation routes, communication systems and engaged with our local authorities. Early warning systems, education and training are other ways that we can be prepared in terms of how we can support people. Making sure that we're letting our residents know about being prepared for disasters, knowing where the evacuation centres are and what those safety measures might be. And then we've got business readiness. We've talked a lot already about insurance. That's going to be more and more challenging for us going forward. Business continuity planning, making sure that we've done full risk assessments of our own business so that we can continue to operate. And incident response plans, how to activate that business continuity plan in our emergency teams, how to make sure that communications support and recovery strategies are there and functioning. And I guess that's one thing that COVID has taught us, is that the ability to get online really quickly and communicate with each other has been a real a bonus, and will see us through, when we do need to get together really quickly. Particularly as a national organisation, a lot of our leaders are not necessarily based on the ground, so having that ability to connect really quickly and make sure that we're able to access that support. So by the very nature of who we are, we will be the first on the ground for those that are most vulnerable in a lot of cases. And as a sector, we just need to spend more time thinking about and talking about this. And, in of itself, this could be an entire thing for a conference. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Okay, so rather than give myself the job of thinking of some questions, and I certainly do have some, I'm really happy to hand over the time if there's any questions from the audience. You can even make a comment, not a question, if you like. Any takers? Maybe I'll just start and see how we get on. I don't know if this is no, it's related. Okay. So I was really pleased to hear that our speakers on this panel today spoke a lot of the importance of architecture, the importance of design. Obviously, that's the area I work in, so it's something that I think is very important. And some of the work that we do is often with marae clients and working with them in terms of resilience, response to flood recovery. And that's not only those that are in low-lying areas, which might have issues around access, flood, inundation, or particularly three waters is a huge issue, wastewater is a huge issue, but also those that might be in higher areas that are likely to get cut off in the event of an emergency event, and thinking about planning for them to be civil defence hubs and how have to include things like, backup generators, areas for helicopters to land, that kind of thing. There is a question in there I know I led with. You can ask, you can make a statement and not a question. I guess my question really is just, I'm interested in your thoughts on kind of in your different roles, what does your particular kind of lens or focus mean in relation to working with Māori communities to be more resilient and to be able to adapt in relation to climate change? Sorry, I hope I made it into a question.
The Mahana House is based kind of on a whare. If you walk into our prototype out at Tuhiriri, you'll see a house that's designed for extended family. It sleeps 8 people. Actually, it will comfortably sleep 16 people. It's 12 by 12. So I guess the design, I mean, as I say, we're building our houses these days with a 2.4 metre stud. We used to build them with a 2.7, 2.8 metre stud. The interior of our houses is very important, and yet we're squashing people down. We worry about what we build our houses out of, but actually 67% of a house's carbon footprint is its operational carbon, how it operates over time. We need to be very, very aware of that. So in terms of, maintenance that people are going to have to spend on their homes. So I think, we just got to build smarter, and I think it was by no accident that Shigeru Ban designed the Kābo Cathedral in a kind of whare type design. So I think we have some of the answers already, but we've lost them over time. We've been told time and time again that our Mahana House, our prototype 4-bedroom, yes, it's great, but we won't be using it really because we're building this kind of high density stuff. And then suddenly they say, well, we've got to be building out in the regions. This is a house perfect, and many others that we designed perfect for Polynesian families, for Māori, those who recognise that actually it's about whānau, it's about community, it's about caring and living together. So I just hope that message can get through to those people that are funding these sorts of things. Not sure if that answers it. But.
It does, kia ora.
Kia ora. Thanks for the question, Jade. I mentioned that my background was freshwater, but my current role is actually working with mana whenua and the mana whenua of Ngāi Tahu on a runanga by runanga basis to support them in anything climate resilience. So you can imagine that is such a broad scope. It's anything from native forest regeneration to marae infrastructure. And really, I mean, the approach is, of course, where it should be, and that it is absolutely runanga, whānau, iwi-led. And so Ngāi Tahu a few years ago actually put out a climate strategy, and they're kind of one of the first iwi to do so. But it really recognised the massive challenge of climate change in terms of they had come so far with their settlement, their treaty settlement in 1998, and that climate change was seen as the absolute threat to everything that they were trying to achieve as part of that settlement. And so that's really translated into actions that Papatipu are all leading, and they're all different, but in terms of recognising tino rangatiratanga and how they express that, that's where Ngāi Tahu as the organisation are just supporting and awing that work.
I think it's also about being really conscious that a lot of our Māori communities are isolated. If you think of, Ruatoria and some of those, some of the Northland type communities, they are isolated, and just making sure that that infrastructure is there for them in terms of communication, in terms of, knowing how to respond in a really quick way, because some of the media talk that we heard through some of the cyclone was that people felt abandoned, that they didn't feel that the response happened in a timely fashion. And that people probably still do feel like they haven't had the resources that they've needed to get back up and running and quickly. So how we can prepare for that next time and just make sure that we've got the steps in place to be able to support that is important.
So I didn't ask my question terribly well, but you all gave such wonderful answers, so thank you all. Please join me in thanking our panel.